Welcome to this week's Culture Report. We're excited to continue bringing you our opinions and viewpoints on issues impacting underrepresented communities. We hope to foster meaningful dialogue by bringing you topics that influence cultural conversations. So let's jump into this week's conversation.
All right, guys. So I know you guys know the Super Bowl was on Sunday, so one of the biggest sporting events happened this past Sunday, like I just said, and all eyes were on who's going to win the big game. But it was more than just football. We saw some historic firsts and a big comeback from one of the biggest artists on the planet. Here are some of our favorite moments from Sunday's game. So starting off, for the first time ever, an all-women's team of aviators flew over the Super Bowl for the pre-game flyover. This historic first celebrated 50 years of women's aviators in the U.S. Navy.
And another historic first is the NFL's partnership with Lucinda La Morena Hinojos. She became the first Chicana Native American artist to do the theme march for the Super Bowl. Her art featured symbols representing vital parts of Arizona's culture and history. Her artwork was seen on Super Bowl tickets, displays, and more.
All right, and this is Cheryl Lee Ralph singing Lift Every Voice and Sing, commonly known as the Black National Anthem. With this performance, she became the first person to perform the Black National Anthem on the field before the Super Bowl.
Some called it the Super Bowl, but most referred to it as the Rihanna concert. Riri served her first live performance in 7 years at this year's Super Bowl halftime show. But was it worth the wait? According to the ratings, yes. Her performance pulled in 5 million more viewers than the actual game did. But fans are still divided on how they feel about her performance, so it doesn't look like that surprise pregnancy announcement kept people excited. But nonetheless, it's good to see her dabble in music again.
And the star of the show was Justina Miles, truly. She was the ASL interpreter that made history, becoming the first Black deaf woman to perform during the Super Bowl. She is also the first deaf person to perform the ASL rendition of the Black National Anthem. So she was lit, as you can see. She ate that up.
She did.
I mean, she was really giving us more energy than some other people that performed. But first, real quick, I just want to know, what are your favorite moments? What was your favorite moment, personally?
Personally, I felt like it was just unmemorable, the whole event.
Oh.
Really?
Unmemorable.
I just didn't think anything was exciting. I forgot about it the next day. I mean, Rihanna's performance was good, but it wasn't great. Could have been better.
Well, I agree with that. Cheryl Lee Ralph was amazing. I loved how she opened with the Black National Anthem, and just seeing her get that spotlight, being so far into her career. The Rihanna concert was very lackluster. It was disappointing. I feel like the energy was very monotone all the way through. What were y'all thoughts?
I liked to see all the diverse dancers. I did like the production of it. I liked where she stood. I mean, that girl had balance, and she's pregnant.
Yeah, that's why I said it was okay. I appreciate what she did as a pregnant woman.
We love Rihanna. I'm a Rihanna stan. We're not gonna do that. I love Rihanna. But she did rely on her hits, which is fine. She did just enough. I was there, I watched. I wasn't there were no jaw-dropping moments.
I think I was waiting for the exciting parts.
Yeah, it was monotone. I mean, if this was a performance prior to 2013 when Beyonce set the bar so high, this would have been a really good performance. This is 2023, 10 years later, this was very lackluster. She was
pregnant. I mean,
she was just there to plug Fenty.
This is her return after 7 years. I mean, I guess she was pregnant, so she did great. Because I know, when you're pregnant, it's rough. But why do it when you're pregnant then? If that's the case,
I don't think she was pregnant when it was announced, though.
Oh.
I don't think so. Actually, she was pregnant before, so I don't know.
I saw it more I left the Super Bowl halftime show thinking okay, she's not passionate about music, and she's just here to plug her Fenty Beauty and Savage.
Fenty Beauty?
Yeah.
It's the perfect moment to do it, though. Actually.
It is.
I mean,
but don't. I'd rather her just be upfront with the fans. Look, music ain't where my heart is no more. Yeah. So I'm just not passionate about it because it shows. That was one of the worst, I think.
But the hits were hidden. The bops are undeniable. She ate that up.
Yeah, the flyover was definitely my favorite, though, for sure. Just watching all this historic first, that's really cool, too. And the artist as well. So, yeah. One growing debate within the Hispanic and Latino community is a term that you probably have heard or seen on headlines. It's the Latinx term. The term emerged in 2004 as an alternate to Latino or Latina that was more inclusive and neutral. But just last month, Arkansas's Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders said she was banning the term from the state document, saying it's ethically insensitive and has no place in official government documents. Connecticut feels the same.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
I'm curious about that because, like, I know I watched whenever she signed the bill, and I was just confused. At what point did it become like disrespectful? Like, what's disrespectful about it? I'm genuinely curious.
Well, I think it's being misused. I think its initial use was to be inclusive of, gender, sexuality of people, and somehow it just got out of control. But I think the main problem, it's only 2% of Hispanics, Latinos actually use it, and it's not in Spanish. I think that's like the main thing. If you're going to promote a term to include more people, the least I think you could do is have it in Spanish. You're not going to say Latinx. Spanish-speaking people say X. They don't say Latinx. So I think that's a big problem just to start with.
That makes more sense to me because coming from New York, like, it was a very widely used term. Yeah.
I've never heard it.
I heard it more.
Latinx, no.
It was when I got to Colorado where I was like, oh, nobody uses the inclusive term. Okay, well, yeah, I guess this is what happened. But like, it was it was widely used and it was very inclusive. But having understand that I'm not a Spanish-speaking person and how it doesn't translate in Spanish, I can understand now the pushback on like why Latino people don't gravitate to using that term. So I get it now.
Yeah, and I don't think it's like Latinos being against political changes with these terms or being more inclusive. I just think it's being misused, and yeah, again, just not even being in Spanish. Romance languages are masculine, feminine.
Right. Yeah.
Table is mesa, tree is árbol, masculine. I mean, you're not going to change the structure of so many years. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. I guess they're trying to be, it is uniquely American, like the term Latinx. So I guess they're trying to be inclusive of the queer community, but in doing that, they also were excluding the Spanish-speaking community. So do you think this term is gonna like catch on?
Is there a more inclusive term?
Yeah, or
is there a different term?
Like an alternate that you think?
I would hope they include one that isn't Spanish to begin with.
I've also heard like Latin
with an E, excuse me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that one would be more acceptable. But I think just changes take time, and Latinx just hasn't caught on.
Yeah, it don't look like it's gonna catch on either. So.
No.
As a part of Black History Month, the Black journalists here at 9 News came together for a roundtable discussion where we shared our experiences navigating this industry in our newsroom as Black journalists. It was an honest and vulnerable conversation on code switching, tokenism, and representation. So let's take a look. Just feeling like, okay, like I can do this. So like that experience, like I carried with me like throughout my whole career.
I love that you brought up 2020, because did y'all all feel that shift?
Yeah. Everybody cares about DEI and inclusion.
That shift changed. I think it was George Floyd and the protests and the racial, awakening, the reckoning, if you want to call it. It really shifted the way Black stories are viewed, because now it's not something we'll make time for. If we have the time, we know we need it. And it's sad that it had to happen in that way, but I feel like now, I don't know if I should feel grateful, but I certainly know that I'm able to tell stories I wasn't able to tell 2 years ago.
Sometimes the only Black person in the newsroom sometimes. So if something would come up, all eyes would be looking at me like, hey, like, what would this make you feel uncomfortable and things like that? And I'm like, I appreciate that you're like asking for my opinion, but also I'm not the mouthpiece for a whole race. I can't speak to how you're gonna feel about it, how you're gonna feel about it. I can tell you how I feel about it, but that's not how everyone that's watching is gonna feel.
That's why I feel like the onus is on us. I mean, not to say, I think being a journalist there's pressures all around, but when you're the only person in editorial meeting, I'm the only Black person that works the night, okay? I have to, I feel like my eyes have to be everywhere. I have to look at not only my stories, but the story, my colleague did, and be like, ooh, that language was problematic, or this made me feel a type of way. You know what I mean? It's like you have to be a gatekeeper too. You have to, it's a lot of pressure.
This is a conversation that me and Jamal were like, I feel privileged to have been a part of, because I think that's the first time I've been in the room with all of the Black journalists here, so it was like a very special conversation. But we also got to like talk about some things, tokenism and representation and DEI and code switching, which is huge in the workplace. And I know y'all weren't a part of that conversation, but what resonated with y'all the most about that?
There's one where Lauren was like, I can't apply for a certain job if there's already a Black reporter or meteorologist there, because that box is already checked.
Yeah.
So I feel kind of the same. Being as a Latina, I always felt like that. I'm like, oh, they have someone. They don't need me, you know. I always felt like that. I don't know why, but I mean, you always have, you know, in interview processes, they're always asking you, do you speak Spanish? And it's always like the same question over and over again, as if I can't bring anything else if I don't speak Spanish, you know.
Yeah, for me, just the fact that you're able to have these conversations now and have those air. I mean, just, you know, that shift of seeing those changes. I really hope like diversity inclusion isn't just like a trend right now after all the 2020 happenings with George Floyd and all. I really hope it's something that's here to stay. But, you know, just from what, you know, Alexia said, I agree with her. I hate seeing like, you know, just checking off a box, you know, to have more people and, you know, more diverse people in there and just check off that box, but not really doing like, you know, the job to bring in the right people. I think that's the code. Yeah. So make sure like you're not just checking a box. I think that's important for companies to do, not just, oh, you know, we have 3 Latinas, that's gonna do it. Like bring in the right people in any, you know, job.
Yeah.
Jamal, what was your experience like prior to 2020?
Prior to well, I was just on the other side of the screen. I was watching the news from then. So watching, I mean, it was fine. Like I lived in a very diverse city. I'm from Houston. So I saw those stories, but after 2020, it felt like it was more intentional. Like they were chasing, like, it was very like nuanced. It wasn't just like, oh, look at this black business. They were talking about actual black issues and how things, not even black issues, just, you know, issues that marginalized communities face, and like in general, because now they know that people are watching them. So it makes me question their intent. Like I hope they have good intentions, and it's just not to check off a box or just so they look good for optics. But yeah, just intention mostly.
Yeah, no, and I love seeing too, from my perspective too, just all these like interviews in Spanish that they're using now. They're adding subtitles instead of using voiceovers, you know, to do those. It's great to see it, you know, just being out there now. I feel like there's more stories that I'm seeing there, and you know, a lot of, you know, different backgrounds, and you learn a lot too. Yeah.
It's definitely evolved since 2020, because I remember being in the industry prior to 2020 and how I felt like I had to fight so hard for representation, whether it be like a story that I wanted to do. I remember being in New York and pitching a story about the LGBTQ Center, and I was getting ready to shoot it, had been working on it for months, setting it up. They gave me the approval to do this documentary, and the week before they like canceled it because they said they just didn't see the value in it. And I was like, oh, okay, oh well.
Yeah.
So just like those kind of fights, and even like being a black journalist, I had other fights similar to that. So it's just changed a lot. So I'm glad to see that we don't have to fight as hard now, post 2020, but you know, we still got some work to do.
Fight a little bit. Yeah.
Right.
What were your thoughts about the code switching? Like, do you feel like you have to be different or behave
all the
differently?
time.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you first get into a new environment, code switching is very important because it's, I always say it's a safety mechanism, how you navigate different spaces. So yeah, I definitely have to code switch. I have to.
Yeah, and that's why I love roundtables like this. To have I was like, so we could all commune with each other to see, like, because it had me think like, okay, because sometimes I think, am I crazy? They just did this and I feel a certain type of way. Is it just me? Am I being crazy? But then I talk to you guys and you're like, oh no, that's real. You're valid. And I'm like, okay, great. And then on the other hand, it's also good for other people in the newsroom to watch it so they can learn from it, so they can, you know, switch up how they walk in the newsroom, how they talk. Like, you know, just maybe like with code switching, some people didn't even know what it was. They were like, oh, I never heard of that. Why would you have to do that? Or when Lauren was talking about how she doesn't apply for jobs that already have a black talent.
That's so real.
People were so surprised by that. They're like, oh, why? That never crossed my mind one time. And they hadn't even considered that people do that. So I think it's really important to continue to have roundtable discussions like this and for people to watch so like they know what we're experiencing. El Paso County is attracting social media attention after an allegedly racially fueled feud between neighbors landed one black couple in jail. Courtney and Nicole Mallory, a black couple from Colorado Springs, have accused their white neighbors and law enforcement officers of harassment and racism after multiple acts of vandalism and animal mutilation of their livestock went unanswered for. Over the last 2 years, more than 20 restraining orders have been filed between the Mallorys and their neighbors. Earlier this month, the couple was arrested after one neighbor provided law enforcement with videos and pictures of activity that El Paso County Sheriff's Office deemed to be criminal in nature. They have since been released. So there are a lot of moving parts with this case. So we invited our legal expert, Whitney Traylor, to join us. So thank you for joining us, one. Something that just keeps sticking out to me is the sheriff's office continued to let the same officer handle the case, even though they had already complained about him multiple times. So do you think they could be at fault for that?
No, you raised a great question, and I actually had that in my notes, was why they kept sending the same officer, because the situation, as you said in the lead-in, they had a number of restraining orders, and the sheriff's office said they responded to over 170 calls, but some of the restraining orders were against the officers themselves. And so this officer having a restraining order against him, even though it was dismissed, 2 of them actually, then that would show some level of bias when you're going, and it was his arrest report that I did read this morning that led to the arrest. And the arrest report actually read, it felt very personal. He was making statements about the easement and whether they had a right to be there or not. And usually law enforcement won't make those kind of civil determinations. That's why people sue each other, neighbors sue each other civilly. So it read somewhat personally, and he reviewed a bunch of video from the neighbor, Teresa Clark, even though the Mallorys had also made a number of complaints as well. So yeah, it raises a question of bias and in fairness. They actually should have gotten somebody from another department probably to even come and investigate.
Yeah. Speaking of video, something that stuck out to me is I read that they took the cameras from the Mallorys, but aren't we allowed to be able to like monitor our property? A lot of people have Ring cameras, right? So
yeah.
What happened?
No, you all are raising all the same issues that I had, because when the police came to issue the arrest warrant, they actually seized 2 of the Mallory's cameras as evidence, and the Mallory's cameras were facing the neighbor who made the complaint, which is understandable that, hey, I don't like their cameras, but they're affixed to their own house. They can, aim their cameras any direction they want. So yeah, they did seize that as part of evidence. So that also seemed a little suspect.
Yeah.
So with all this going on, there's like, how should a neighbor, and they both feel threatened by each other, what should they do in this situation,
Exactly, and when you read it, and it really depends, and this is our court system, depending on who's advocating for you and who's advocating more zealously will be really who a jury believes. And here, if you read one person's restraining order versus the other, it's going to read totally the opposite. And so for me, one of the key points that I put was, this is a case that's ripe for mediation. So there's potential criminal action, where the prosecutor will come in and say, yeah, you were stalking, and they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But there's also these civil claims where we as a society have said this is not how we want to treat one another. And so they could end up in court suing each other civilly as well. But as part of that, there's something called mediation, which is where a third party comes in to try and help people resolve it. If there's ever a case for mediation, this is it. I mean, it sounds serious and people are alleging that they're scared of one another, but unless somebody's going to move, they're going to have to figure out a way to coexist. And so mediation seems like something that they should be exploring.
What a mess.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And this is not unusual to have neighbors where it's a dispute about the fence or the music or the dog barking. And then, we're in a society now where things escalate. And this hasn't escalated to the point of, there's allegations of, animal mutilations and all these other things, but there hasn't been at least any assault on one another. But this is a classic situation of sort of a microcosm of our society now, in how quickly everybody is ready to get fired up, and this is something, if you're going to stay there, you got to learn how to live together.
Mm-hmm. Did you find it interesting that they made it a point to release all the documents and the video, but they like they didn't talk about the fact that the officer was, accused 4 times. They didn't even make mention or talked about why that was allowed to happen.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And something else they didn't talk about was, I don't know if it was a result of the publicity, but they went back and reviewed all 170 calls, and 2 of the cases they reactivated, one of which involved an allegation against the police. So, eyes being on it, I think has been a good thing in terms of the fairness of justice going forward.
Well, this is definitely something we'll probably be following for a while, it sounds like. So thank you for coming on and giving your expertise on this.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I've been hearing about the culture report, so I feel like I made it. I made it on the scenes.
So welcome.
Yes, thank you.
This Friday, Black farmers will host a rally at the Colorado State Capitol to urge lawmakers to pass the Karen Act. The NAACP, ACLU, and the Colorado Black Caucus and more will attend to lend their support. All right, so each week we want to celebrate what's the good that's happening in the culture, the good news. So here's our good news. A cousin of Emmett Till filed a federal lawsuit to compel Mississippi sheriff to serve an arrest warrant to Carolyn Bryant, the white woman connected to Till's kidnapping and lynching in 1955. Relatives discovered the almost 70-year-old warrant just last year while searching a Mississippi courthouse for evidence. This week, the White House also announced it will screen the film Till that depicts the story of the 14-year-old Emmett Till. This very rare event follows the Anti-Lynching Act that was passed in 2022 by the Biden administration.
All right, and the NFL spotlighted flag football star Diana Flores. The Mexican quarterback headlined the Super Bowl commercial, Run With It, alongside recognizable sports faces like sideline reporter Erin Andrews, tennis legend Billie Jean King, and multiple professional players. The NFL is betting on Flores to attract fans and promote female participation in American football.
All right, and the Queen of Salsa, Celia Cruz, will be the first Afro-Latina to be on the U.S. quarter. The U.S. Mint announced that Celia will be featured on the 2024 coin. This is part of the American Woman Quarter program that celebrates the achievements and contributions of American women.
All right, and my good news is a new charter school expected to open in Denver soon. The 5280 Freedom School has goals to tailor their curriculum to emphasize Black history and Black knowledge to help make young students proud of their identities. They just need enough students enrolled to open in the fall. So if you're interested, enrollment has been extended to February 21st, so check them out. All right, thank you for joining us this week for this episode of The Culture Report.